Welcome to English Grammar Spot. This tutorial is about the past perfect. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you how to form a past perfect and when to use a past perfect. But before we get started, it's good to know that in the English language we have regular and irregular verbs, and it is advisable that you study the most commonly used irregular verbs. Now let's get started. Take a look at these sentences. I had painted the door yellow. They had paid for dinner themselves. Both these sentences are in the past perfect tense. How do we form a past perfect? For the regular verbs, we use the auxiliary verb to have, but now the past form of to have, which is had, and the past participle. The past participle can be made by adding ed to the base form of the verb. For example, I had kissed her, you had worked late, he had cleared the table, she had placed it on the floor, it had snowed. For the plural forms we do the same. We had walked to school, you had watched the tennis match, and they had marked the tests. Now we need to pay extra attention to verbs that end in an E, such as live, close and wipe. These verbs use had and a past participle, but in forming a past participle we only use the base form of the verb and add a D. For example, I had lived there, he had closed the window, and they had wiped the floor. We also need to pay extra attention to verbs that end in a Y, especially those preceded by a consonant such as spy and study. Here the Y becomes an I. For example, he had spied on his neighbours, and we had studied hard. Now let's have a look at the past perfect for the irregular verbs. Again, we use the past simple form of to have and a past participle, but here the past participle has a unique past perfect form. For example, I had built that shed with my own two hands. The infinitive form of the verb is to build. She had bought some flowers at the market. The infinitive form of the verb is to buy. We had run the marathon. The infinitive form of the verb is to run. Let's have a look at the past perfect in questions. For the regular verbs, again we use the past simple form of the auxiliary verb to have and the past participle. Again, the base form of the verb and ed. Had she talked to him? Had you kicked the ball? Had they worked on a farm? For the irregular verbs, we also use the auxiliary verb to have, so had, and the past participle, and again the unique past perfect form. So, had she quit her job? Had you driven her car? Had they paid for dinner? Let's have a look at the past perfect in negations. First again for the regular verbs, we use had plus not, contracting it into hadn't, and the past participle, which again is made by adding ed to the base form of the verb. I hadn't listened to the news. It hadn't rained since Friday. They hadn't closed the window. And for the irregular verbs, we use had and not, contracting it into hadn't, and the past participle. But again, here, the past participle has a unique past perfect form. For example, she hadn't quit her job. You hadn't ever driven her car, and they hadn't paid for dinner. Now let's have a look at when we use a past perfect. We use a past perfect for things that happened in the past but before something else in the past. So we use it to coordinate the past. We have two things happening in the past, and the past perfect happened at the furthest point in the past. For example, I had brushed my teeth before I went to bed. So first I brushed my teeth and then I went to bed, and both these things happened in the past. Another example is, they decided to buy a car after the old one had broken down. So first their old car broke down and then they decided to buy a car. I thank you for your attention. For regular updates, please subscribe to youtube.com/EnglishGrammarSpot or go to www.englishgrammarspot.com.